Breaking news. Although Putin did not attend the funeral for Prigozhin, Kyiv has gained a foothold in the region. According to reports, Ukrainian forces have established a foothold in the southern Zaporizhia region, less than 3 miles from Russia's defensive lines. On Tuesday, the General Staff in Kyiv announced that Ukrainian forces had achieved success within the recaptured frontiers, and were now using artillery to attack enemy targets that had been detected and were also taking counter-battery measures. A spokesperson for the Kremlin said today that President Vladimir Putin will not be attending the funeral of Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin, so this news of developments on the battlefield comes on the same day. Dmitry Peskov, speaking to reporters at a press briefing, said that the Kremlin was unaware of the funeral plans because it was an internal family matter. 2 months ago, Prigozhin and his Wagner mercenaries staged a mutiny against Russian military commanders, seizing control of the city of Rostov in the south and advancing towards Moscow before turning back 200 kilometers, 125 miles, from the capital. Prigozhin died last week when his business jet crashed. Western politicians and commentators have speculated that Putin ordered Prigozhin's death as an act of revenge, but this has been deemed an absolute lie by Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. The Vatican said on Tuesday that despite criticism from Ukraine, Pope Francis did not intend to glorify Russian imperialism when he praised the czars who expanded the Russian Empire during a speech last week. In off-the-cuff comments following his speech to Russian youth on Friday, Francis reminded them that they are the direct descendants of previous czars like Peter I and Catherine II. President Vladimir Putin has used the legacies of the two czars, who expanded the Russian Empire in the 17th and 18th centuries by conquering parts of Ukraine, to justify his own invasion and annexation of territory last year. Pope Francis, according to Vatican spokesman Matteo Bruni, intended to encourage young people to preserve and promote all that is positive in the great Russian cultural and spiritual heritage, and certainly not to exalt imperialist logic and government personalities, Bruni said. It was called deeply regrettable in Kyiv, while very gratifying in the Kremlin. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, reported on Tuesday that due to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, only about a third of school-aged children there are attending classes fully in person, and many of them are falling behind. UNICEF reports that due to language barriers and overburdened education systems, more than half of the children whose families have fled the conflict to 7 countries are not enrolled in national education systems. Since Russia's invasion 18 months ago, missile and artillery attacks have been commonplace in civilian areas, resulting in damage to some schools and the closure of others as a precaution. Children in Ukraine, deeply distressed, and without safe spaces to learn, because of continued unabated attacks on schools, it read. According to UNICEF, some Ukrainian children will be starting their 4th consecutive school year with disruptions because of the war and previous COVID disruptions. According to Regina de Dominicis, UNICEF's regional director for Europe and Central Asia, not only has this left Ukraine's children struggling to progress in education, but they are also struggling to retain what they learned when their schools were fully functioning. Half of all teachers in Ukraine have noticed a decline in their students' language, reading, and math skills, the report found. Russia's defense ministry claimed without providing details on Tuesday that a Russian military jet shot down a Ukrainian drone over the Black Sea. Dmitry Peskov, a spokesman for Russian President Vladimir Putin, said on Tuesday that Putin has no intention of attending the funeral of Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of the Wagner mercenary group. He told the press that the Kremlin had no idea about the funeral because it was up to the family. 2 months ago, Prigozhin and his Wagner mercenaries staged a mutiny against Russian military commanders, seizing control of the city of Rostov in the south and advancing towards Moscow before turning back 200 kilometers, 125 miles, from the capital. Prigozhin died last week when his business jet crashed. The suggestion from some Western politicians and commentators that Putin ordered Prigozhin's death in revenge has been deemed an absolute lie by the Kremlin. Authorities have reportedly been seen at a St. Petersburg cemetery, fueling rumors that the funeral for the late Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin may take place today. Last Wednesday, Prigozhin was killed in a plane crash to the north of Moscow. It has been speculated that Putin, the Russian president, ordered Prigozhin's death because it occurred only 2 months after Wagner's boss led an armed rebellion against Putin.